Hello and a warm welcome to Sarat Chandra IAS Academy, where our dreams are our mission. This is Yatharth here. In today's video, we'll be talking about important foreign travelers who came to India. We'll be seeing various different points, such as what period they came in, under whose reign, and important things they observed, as well as any other relevant point for the prelims. So let's see which foreign travelers we are going to cover today. Of course, we will not be able to cover everything, but just a few which are more important. So Megasthenes, Nearchus, and then Demikos, Helidros, Ptolemy, Fahan, Hansang, Wazwangs, Ising, Suleiman, Al-Masudi, Alberoni, Marco Polo, Nunes, and many times question have been asked on the Nunes especially, and Nicolo Deti. So let's start with the Heliodorus. All right, so I've started with the Heliodorus because he was among us the first to come to India, and he came in the period of 1010 BC. So rather early. All right, this is the Heliodorus pillar in the Vidisha, Madhya Pradesh. In the Vidisha, Madhya Pradesh. And where in Vidisha? This is located in the Baisnagar. In the Baisnagar. Alright, so it was established by the Heliodorus or maybe in the memory of Heliodorus later on. So who was he? He was an ambassador sent by the Greek king. Okay, please remember the Greek. He was a Greek traveler. Greek king Antiochus. Antiochus. Alright, and he visited India during the reign of Bhagabhadra. These are two important points that you need to remember. He came during the reign of Bhagabhadra. And this was a king, the fourth king of the Shunga dynasty. So Shunga dynasty was there before the Mauryan dynasty and all. Alright, in this reign they ruled. In the reign of the Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, and so on. Alright, you can read about the Shunga dynasty. Just a second, I'll create the extensions. Okay, so he erected the Vedisha pillar in the Vaisanagar. We have already talked about this, and he described himself as the Param Bhagavata. Param Bhagavata. So definitely he was influenced with some religious philosophies in India. All right, let's move to the next one. That is again very important. That is Megasthenes. All right, so Megasthenes, what was the period of the Megasthenes? His period was 302 to 298 BC. All right, he came between this time and he was very, very famous. Everybody knows about his book and visit. He came during the reign of the Chandragupta Maurya. Chandragupta Maurya. All right, and he was ambassador also. Ambassador of who? Seleucus Nicator. Seleucus Nicator. Okay, and he wrote a book. Which book did he write? Indica. All right. He also called the Chandragupta as the Sandrocotus. Sandrocotus. So probably a language difference, nothing else. He also observed at that time that slavery did not exist in India. Okay. However, it may or may not be correct because Chandragupta Maurya, during the time of the Mauryan Empire, there was slavery, all right, at various different points. But according to Megasthenes, there was no slavery in India. All right, let's move further to the Nearchus. Nearchus was here between the periods of 326 and 324 BC. And this is all in BC. So he was the army head of the Alexander. Army head of Alexander. So obviously he came before the Megasthenes. Okay, he visited during the reign of the Dhanananda of the Nanda dynasty. That was before the Mauryan dynasty. Before the Mauryan dynasty. Which dynasty? Nanda dynasty. All right, and he came in the rule of the Dhanananda. Dhanananda, very famous ruler, the strongest ruler of the Nanda dynasty. All right, there was a book written by the Aryan. The author's name is Aryan. What is the book's name about the Nearchus? The Voyage of Nearchus from Indus. The voyage. Voyage means the journey. especially a journey on ship. Alright, the voyage of Nearchus from Indus. So this book was written by the Aryan. So it tells about the attacks of Nearchus in India. So he was here in the role of an enemy. Okay, so he also gives a reference. This book also gives a reference about the Gynome sophists, gymno sophists or Gynome sophists. It is about the naked ascetics. All right, so he was probably talking about the Jainism, but no reference about the Buddhism that time. No reference about the Buddhism as per the Niarchus. All right, next one we see the Demacos. So let's come to him. So he came during the reign. Let's talk about the period first, 320 to 273 BC. 320 to 273 BC. So he came during the reign of the Bindusar. Very important point of the Mauryan dynasty. So Mauryan dynasty is pretty famous, and you should remember all of these: Megasthenes, Demiochus. All right, and he was a Greek ambassador. He was again a Greek ambassador. All of the let's say primary travelers to India. Of course, the travelers had been coming since time immemorial, but when we talk about the ancient history, we see the Greeks first, and this Greek ambassador was sent by the Antiochus I. Antiochus I. Now this was Antiochus I was the son of the Seleucus Nicator. Seleucus Nicator. All right, and he called Bindusar as the Amitraghat. He called Bindusar as Amitraghat. So you should read about all these rulers from the Mauryan dynasty, whether it is Bimbisar, whether it is the Chandragupta Maurya, whether it is the Bindusar, whether it is Ashok, and the travelers who came to India during these reign especially. All right, so this is very important. Demacos, he called Amitraghat to Bindusar. Okay, often this is not asked that who called Bindusar Amitraghat. It is asked that which king was called Amitraghat by the Demiochus. All right, so answer is Bindusar. All right, let's come to Ptolemy now. Okay, Ptolemy was in the AD period. So he came during 130 AD period. 130 AD. And he was one of the early scholars, you can call him. He was a geographer. And he was also from Greece, from the north of the Mediterranean. And he visited which part of India? South India. Okay, earlier we were seeing people coming towards the travelers coming towards the this side, the central Indian side, okay, towards the Magad and the Mauryan Empire. But this traveler visited the South India during the Sangam period. During the Sangam period. So this is the important point. It is when we say that he visited South India during the Sangam period, it does not mean that he never went up north. He never went this side, that side. He just came to South India and went from here. But his notable works are from here. Okay, and the evidences that have been found for his coming here in India have been found from more south. All right, so he also wrote a book, The Geography of India. He was a geographer, he wrote about the geography of India. So it is very certain that he must have visited other parts of India also. But in his book, he lists 6 coastal places in Tamil Nadu. 6 coastal places in Tamil Nadu. So this is important point about the Ptolemy. Let's now go towards the Fahan. Fahan, very important again. He was from China. His period is 405 to 411 AD. Okay, so pretty late as a traveler, we can say. Then he was a Chinese. And you can see a shift from the Greek travelers towards the Chinese traveler now. And he was Buddhist, primarily Buddhist. Alright, so he visited India during the reign of who? Chandragupta II. Very famous ruler, one of the most famous ruler of India, Chandragupta II, also known as Vikramaditya. Chandragupta II, also known as Vikramaditya. Of which dynasty? Gupta dynasty. So one of the biggest dynasties of India. He wrote a book known as the Foucault Key. Foucault Key, Travels of the Fahan. Travels of Fahan. So further, he spent 6 years in Gupta Empire. So 6 years is a lot of time to observe. So we get to know a lot from Fahan, the visit of Fahan. And he wrote about the economic prosperity of the Pataliputra. Pataliputra is now known as Patna in Bihar. One more book that Fahan wrote was Fugo Oji. Fugo Oji. It was about the Buddhistic kingdoms. Alright, or the extent of Buddhism basically. Then we talk about, but the more important book is the second one which we talked about earlier, that is Fukoki. Okay, and please do not confuse it with Suyoki. Suyoki was not written by Fahan. Alright, please do not confuse with this. It is Fukoki. Fukoki. Alright, so it's a bit confusing in the exam sometimes. Let's come to the Hansang. Hansang, very simple trick. Sometimes people get confused between Hansang and Fahan and so on. But I'll just let you know how to remember this. Okay, so first of all, his reign was 630 to 645 AD. Okay, now from Hansang, you can pick up the H and add it to Harshvardhana. Okay, so both have H in their name. You can just correlate now on. So he came during the Harshvardhana's rule. And who was Harshvardhana? He was from the Pushyabhuti dynasty. Pushyabhuti dynasty. Alright. Second thing, that he was also a Chinese Buddhist. He was also a Chinese Buddhist traveler in India. He also visited the court of, first of all, he came to, just a second. Let's assume this is India. So he came to India via this side. Okay, and then he also went down south. So in south, what he did, he visited the court of Narasimha Varman. Court of Narasimha Varman. Alright, of the Pallava dynasty. Which dynasty? Pallava dynasty. And this person, this king, Narasimhavarman, is very famous from the Pallava dynasty. You can especially read about the temples and all he constructed. Okay, and Pulkesin II. Pulkesin II, again very famous, of the Chalukya dynasty. Of the Chalukya dynasty. And travelers had this privilege, they could go even to the enemy kingdoms. Alright. He also studied Yoga Shastra in Nalanda. In Nalanda. Alright, and his book was which? Siyuki. Siyuki. So very important traveler and one of the most important travelers actually. Alright, now let's come to the Wangzuans. One more point why Hansang is so important to India, because he stayed here for over 16 years. Alright, so stayed here for a very long time. Now let's come to the Wangzuans. So Wangzuans was here between the period of 648 to 664 AD. Even later than the two famous travelers. He was again a Chinese ambassador. He was again from China and ambassador. Okay, so whose ambassador he was? Tang dynasty. Tang dynasty. And he visited India during the rule of the Harshvardhana. So bit later, but at the same, in the reign of the same ruler in which Hansang visited. Alright, and he stayed 16 years in India. But there is a tragedy associated with this Wang Zuan. So what happened? That he came from China to India thinking that actually Harshvardhana had sent an ambassador to the Tang dynasty earlier. So he came in exchange. He was a foreign diplomat sort of person, ambassador. So once he came to India from China, he realized that Harshavardhana had unfortunately died, passed away by this time. And there was a new king known as the Arunasava. So he was not really happy with this ambassador coming to India. So he, in fact, attacked him, this Wang Zhuang, and 30 his 30 subordinates. So they had to fly back to, they had to, let's say, go back to China from Tibet. Now, later on, what he does, he goes back to Tibet and Nepal, and there creates an army of the 7,000 Nepalese people, 1,200 Tibetan people, and then he attacked India. So he didn't, although his initial intent was to come as an ambassador and a traveler, he became an attacker because of being attacked himself first. Okay. So what happened that he attacked India and actually won. So he secured a reported Buddhist relic for China, and even 2,000 prisoners were taken from Magadh by the Nepali and Tibetan force under this Wong. All right, now let's come to the next one, that is Aizing or Aizyang. So he came to India during 671 and between 695 AD. All right, so he was a student of Hansang. He was a student of the Hansang. And he visited during the reign of, again, Harshvardhana. Now, a general doubt arises that how could he visit during the reign of Harshvardhana when Harshvardhana had actually died, as we told earlier. Alright, but this is what mentioned in most of the books. And this is the correct answer as per most of the books and exam keys. However, what we can say is it's of course not possible that he visited during the period of Harshvardhana, but he may have visited during the period of Pala dynasty, or there may be some alteration in the records. Alright, so this we'll just remember as a fact that he visited during the reign of Harshvardhana again. Maybe there is some let's say discrepancy in the time period he came, which shows mostly to a good extent that it is correct. But this is of course not correct that he visited during the reign of Harshvardhana. Alright, but this is what is mentioned in most of the books. So let's just talk about his book. His book is named as A Record of Buddhist Religion. He's not very important, but is mentionable, of course, as he was the student of Hansang. There are few more important points about him which we must mention. Just a second. Okay, so he stayed at the Tamrilipti. Tamrilipti, it's a place where he learned Sanskrit. So this is the most asked question about the Ising. One more thing, that he was from the Tang era, from the Tang dynasty of the China. And we should not get confused between the Fahan and Ising or Ising, because they both studied Sanskrit, but Fahan studied Sanskrit at Patliputra and Ising studied Sanskrit at Tamrilipti. Okay, so these are few important points. One more important point about the Ising is he stayed in Nalanda monastery for 10 years. For 10 years he stayed at the Nalanda monastery, and there he read about the Vinaya or Vinaya Pitaka. Vinaya Pitaka or Vinaya Pitaka. So this is one of the Buddhist thoughts and philosophies. So these are the important points about the Ising. Okay, now let's come to the Muslim travelers, especially the Suleiman. So he came to India in 850 AD. 850 AD. And he was from the Arab. Now he was not an ambassador or a traveler, he was a merchant. He visited the Pala Empire, the Pala dynasty. Who was the founder of the Pala dynasty? It was Gopala. Okay, but he did not visit during the time of Gopala, he visited during the time of Devapala. So he called the Pala kingdom as the Ruhuma. As the Ruhuma. This is very important point. Okay, he also visited the court of Amhogvarsha I. Of Amhogvarsha. Of which dynasty? Rashtrakuta dynasty. Rashtrakuta dynasty. So he came towards this side of the South India, the Deccan side. Alright, and especially let's say this region. Okay, now let's talk about the next one, that is very famous again, Al Masudi. Okay, he was also an Arab traveler. Arab traveler. He visited the Pratihar kingdom. Which kingdom? Pratihar kingdom. So this is located mostly towards Gujarat and this side. Okay, the Gurjar Pratihar kingdom and so on. And Pratihar kingdom, he was like he addressed the Pratihar kingdoms as Al Zuzra. Al Zuzra. His book's name is the Muruz, Muruj, Muruz Al Zahab. Very complicated and confusing names. He was also known as the Herodotus of the Arabs. Herodotus of Arabs. So he compared India with Italy. He compared India with Italy and called Rome as Banaras. Rome as Banaras. All right. Let's come to the next one. Very famous again, Al-Baruni, and the most famous of them all and most scholarly of them all. He came to India during the period of 1024, 1024 and 1030 AD. Okay, so he was a Persian scholar. He was a Persian scholar. This earlier the region of Iran was known as Persia. Okay, so he was not from Arab, he was from Iran, and he was accompanied with, or he was accompanied by, or he accompanied actually Mahmud of the Ghazni. Mahmud of Ghazni. So of course the Ghazni had different intentions coming to India. However, we are talking about the Al-Baruni. He was known as father of the Indology. Father of Indology. Okay, and his book, which is very, very famous, known as Tehqiq-e-Hind. Tehqiq-e-Hind. Alright, other books are Kanun-e-Masudi. Other books are Kanun-e-Masudi. We're not talking about Masudi. We're not talking about this Masudi here. Alright, we are. I just forgot to mention the period. It is 957 AD. Okay, so we are not talking about Masudi here. It can be confusing that who wrote Kanun-e-Masudi. So Al-Baruni wrote. Alright. And next thing that we see, this Kanun-e-Masudi was on astronomy. This was on astronomy. And Zawahir fil Jawahir. Which book? Zawahir fil Zawahir. So you must have heard of the word Zawaharat, Hire Javaharat. So this was on mineralogy. Alright, let's come to the next one. Very famous Marco Polo. Alright, he came to India in 1292. Very, very famous. You can even watch his series on Netflix. Very interesting. 2094. Alright, he was an Italian traveler. But he also visited the kingdom of Kublai Khan. Alright. One more thing we see that he visited southern India. He visited southern India during the reign of the Rudramma Devi. Rudramma Devi of the Kakatiya's kingdom. Which kingdom? Kakatiya kingdom. Alright, he also visited the Mongol leader of China, Kublai Khan, the grandson of Genghis Khan. He visited Pandyan kingdom, Chola Chera Pandya, the Pandyan kingdom during the reign of the Madvarman Kulashekhara. Whose reign? Madvarman Kulashekhara. Alright, let's come to the next one. That is Nicolo di Conti, very famous. So his period was 1420 and 1421. Alright, so he was a Venetian merchant and explorer. He came from Venice. Alright, and he came in 15th century. So he traveled in whole Asia, not specifically came to India, but India he came between 1420 and 1421. Alright, so he came to India during the reign of the Devaraya I of Sangam dynasty. Devaraya I. Some books also say that he came during the period of Devaraya II. So both can be possible, but I prefer Devaraya I. You can read more about this. When did he come, let's say, especially. So he came during the Devaraya I of the Sangam period. Second thing, he described the kingdoms of the Kembe, Gujarat and the Vijayanagar Empire all. And one more important point which is often asked in exam, that he compared the Telugu language with Italian language. And he said that it is Italian of the East. It is Italian of the East. So which traveler compared Telugu language to Italian language or said it is Italian of the East? Then the answer is Nicolo di Conti. Alright. One more thing. Let's come to the Fernando Nunes, this one. So last year only the question was asked that according to the Portuguese writer Nunes, he was from Portugal. Alright, the women in the Vijayanagar Empire. So he visited the Vijayanagar Empire. The women were expert in the following areas. All right. So here the options were wrestling, astrology, accounting, soothsaying, and answer was all of the above. Wrestling was the confusing part here. All right, but according to him, women were also expert in the wrestling. Okay, so he was from Portugal. This is the important thing about him, and he visited the Vijayanagar Empire. So he was from Portugal, and he visited the Vijayanagar Empire. So what was the period of his visit? 1535 to 1537. And in whose period he visited this Vijayanagar Empire? In the reign of the Achyut Devaraya. So he was the younger brother of the Krishna Devaraya and he celebrated rule of the Tuluva dynasty. Krishna Devaraya is very famous because of his ruling methodologies as well as his ministers. All right, Tenali Ram was one of his ministers. So Nunes' writing offer valuable first-hand accounts of life in Vijayanagara, and most of the things about Vijayanagara we can know from this, let's say, writing of the Nunes. Another important point is he also talks about the expansion of the capital city in the Vijayanagar Empire during the reign of the Bukkaraya II and Devaraya I. The Bukkaraya II and Devaraya I. So, which traveler tells about the expansion of the capital city? It is Fernando Nunes. So, please read about this Fernando Nunes especially. So, this is in short a description of the travelers who came to India. So, this is where we finish the lecture. This is Yatharth here. I'm signing off. If you have any doubts, any feedbacks in the comment section, please let me know. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Keep studying and see you soon in the next lecture.